What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for joining me today. So today is going to be a really special video. It's going to be my top 5 or top 7, depending on how many you like to count in, my top 5 boots of all time. And I'm really excited to share these with you. I've gotten a bunch of requests for this video, particularly because I've been doing a couple new boot reviews, obviously with the Ultra over here and the Predator Freak Plus over here. So stay tuned to find out if these two boots made it into the list. And without further ado, guys, let's hop into it. All right, guys, so with this list, I decided to have a top 5 plus 2 special mention boots. I had a lot of boots that I've worn over my career that I think are really fantastic, all the way back from year 6 and year 7 till now as I'm a 25-year-old professional player. So it's been a really tough situation for me trying to decide actually which ones that I enjoyed the most and be really objective about things that I liked about them. Maybe there was a specific colorway, performance, fit and feel on feet, and of course there's that nostalgia feeling for a couple of these boots that I put on the list that aren't sort of the brand new ones, but I have a really fond memory of wearing them and I wish I could find them now. So without further ado, let's get into the special mentions. Number 7. All right, so the number 7 place boot that I've ever worn is actually the Puma Ultra 1.1. I think this is a fantastic speed boot. It's one of the best on the market right now, if not the best, one of the best speed boots ever to be made. I think this takes a lot of inspiration from the Puma SL, puts it into a knit material like what the Vapor 13 was, and then makes it really light, and then adds a lot of lockdown, and I think this boot is just fantastic, especially because it fits wide-footed players. This is a pair of blue ones that I will be keeping probably for a very long time just because I think the color is really beautiful, and I am really excited that this is my number 7 special mention. The reason it is not higher on the list is because it is not as durable as some of the other boots on the list, particularly with these lace holes. I think they could have done better. They're really small little bands that go across that are part of this Evo knit upper, and I think they could have done better on that. I think they also could have done better making some of this material a little bit lower volume. So if this boot was a little more streamlined, I think it would have been much higher on the list. So that is number 7. Okay, so number 6, and my second special mention is the Predator Freak, both in this variation and in the 0.1 high cut, low cut variation. The thing that they did really well with this generation of Predator was that they made the entire boot the exact same, whether you wanted the laceless version, you wanted the laced version in the high cut, or you wanted the laced version in the low cut. I think that was such a brilliant idea because what it does is it allows players to say, what do I want as far as lockdown goes? Do I like the high cut collar? Do I want a laceless boot? And with all of them, you get essentially the same fit and feel, which I think is just a brilliant job by Adidas. I've been so impressed with these boots. I absolutely love the laceless feel of these. I think they feel like slippers on my feet, and I've been playing really, really well in them. Obviously, as you know, and I always preach this, it's always about the player, not the tools, but having a pair of tools that you really like to use is fantastic. The reason they're above the Puma Ultra is because I actually found these to be a more soft feel, and I found just that I preferred that more. And you'll see that as we progress into the top 5. Love the Demon Skin spikes. I think they've done a much better job from the previous generation to this generation, and I'm really looking forward to what they do with this boot moving forward. So that is number 6. So number 5 is a boot that I wore back in 2008, 2007. I was in year 7 or 8, and it was the first pair of high-end football boots that I ever wore in my career. It was the T90 Laser IIs in the leather variant. I also wore the synthetic variant, but I think the T90 Laser IIs were a fantastic football boot. Obviously, headed by Wayne Rooney. That was kind of the talisman for that particular boot. It was built for strikers. It had that strike zone, big plastic elements all over the upper. It was really wide fitting, so it fit my foot really well, and I very much have a nostalgia feeling towards that boot because it was my very first top-end model. Before then, I had worn like the F30, the Tune-It F30s, or the David Beckham like takedown models of the Predators, things like that that weren't really top-end, but these were the first top-end boots that I wore. I wore the black leather with the yellow, and then I had the white and red variant that hopefully one of those will be on the screen. So those were number 5. I love those boots. They were really clunky, and they definitely had kind of a weird texturing to them because there was such a big plastic. I would give them an 8.5 out of 10, which is a very high rating for me. I tend not to rate boots that highly most of the time, pretty much across the board. So 8.5 out of 10 for the number 5 spot, the T90 Laser II. 4th place goes to the famous and infamous Nike Hypervenom Phantom 1, the first generation that introduced the Nike Skin upper, which was this honeycomb structure that wrapped your foot so snugly, and it was so soft and pliable. People were just absolutely blown away, and I think people have been asking for that type of remake boot ever since Nike stopped making them. I think it was such a fantastic boot. The only downside to it was the durability, and it was so comfortable. It was so great for wide-footed players. The sole plate was incredible because it was like a speed boot and an agility boot sole plate kind of hybrid, but it had conical studs, so that's the round studs. And it was so fantastic. I loved that boot. I wore that boot my senior year in high school, my freshman year in college. So I wore that boot for almost 2 years, went through about 14 pairs of them. In fact, my first season in uni, because we were training so often, I went through 5 or 6 pairs in about 3 months or 4 months. Don't worry, I didn't pay for all those boots. I had to return them to Nike, and I got new ones back every time. But I was absolutely thrilled with how those boots fit and feel. They were really light, and I would give them an 8.5 out of 10 as well. I thought they were just fantastic. Again, only downside was that they started to rip pretty quickly, and mine had a defect because of how wide my feet are in a certain area in the midfoot, and it started to rip the upper in that place. So that's why I wouldn't put these higher up on the list, because I know for a lot of people those were probably the number 1 boots they've ever worn. Okay, so now we hop into the top 3. Now the top 3 boots, I would say, and again, any of these 7 boots, as you've seen right here, I love wearing some of these. I think they are fantastic, but the top 3 for me really were sort of the defining boots that I think about in my career. They're the boots that I enjoyed the most. They're the boots that I wore for the longest period of time, or tried to wear for the longest period of time. And they're the 3 boots that I've actually tried to purchase on the resale market because I love them so much. I'd love to go try to find a pair of boots like that again. So without further ado, guys, let's hop into the top 3 boots I've ever worn in my career. 3rd place goes to a very special pair of boots. Came out for the 2010 World Cup, and that is the Nike Tiempo Legend III Elite variation with the carbon fiber sole plate. Now, you've probably seen, if you're into the boot market, you're into the boot world, I guess, you've probably seen that a lot of professional players get custom built shoes. Now, a lot, including Sergio Busquets, Andres Iniesta, Neymar even has had this sole plate, all from that Tiempo Legend 3, Tiempo Legend 4 generation that was such a good sole plate. So first of all, sole plate, absolutely incredible. Such a great all-around sole plate that I think would be fantastic on any pair of boots. And it introduced a leather synthetic, or a synthetic leather, I guess, upper that was awesome because you could wear it in the rain. And in where Seattle, which is where I'm from, wearing boots like that in the rain was awesome because my foot was never soaking wet. The leather didn't overstretch. It was just a fantastic fit on feet. So I would give those a 9 out of 10. The Tiempo Legend 3 Elite. The 2 colorways that were my absolute favorite. One was the World Cup colorway. That was the first pair that I had. The second was my absolute, I think, probably my favorite pair of boots of all time just for the color, and that was the maroon with the white stripe and the black accents. That colorway, kind of similar to the Ronaldinho, that maroon Ronaldinho boot that came out as well. But these Tiempo Legend 3 Elites in the maroon color were one of the most beautiful pairs of boots I had ever seen in my life, and I absolutely loved them. All right, so second place goes to the Nike Magista Obra 1, the first boot to introduce knit into the market, which now a ton of companies are using, and the high cut collar, which also Adidas is using still now. So the high cut collar plus the knit material, you've had those brio cables or the fly wire cables that came into that upper from the bottom of the sole plate and connected into the lace holes. That was such a cool technology. Obviously the collar was sort of this nuanced thing. It didn't do much as far as lockdown, but it really did make it feel like a sock. I had those Nike Magista Obras from the time that I stopped wearing Hypervenom Is until my junior year in college. So almost 2.5 years I wore those boots. I felt like those were fantastic. They're really suitable for wide-footed players. They had a great touch on the ball, really thin knit material, and I would pick those up in a heartbeat. Anything under about $500 I'd be willing to pay for a pair of those brand new. I think they were just insane, and I loved them. Great lockdown, and again, those are my number 2. I would give those a 9.5 out of 10, one of the highest ratings that I would give any boot on the market ever. All right, so now we are at number 1. Now, this probably won't be a surprise if you've been watching the channel for a long time, but for those of you who are new, my number 1 boot of all time is the Hypervenom Phantom 3. It combined the knit feeling that I got from the Obra 1, the shape and sort of the striker winger variant shape of the boot from the Hypervenom 1. It had those brio cables that came up from the bottom of the shoe into the lace loop, so it had a really good lockdown, and it improved on the already fantastic sole plate from the Obra 1 and the Hypervenom 1. So Hypervenom 3 was and still is my absolute all-time favorite. I wore both the high cut and the low cut. I prefer the low cut for that particular shoe. Obviously, for some other shoes, it might be a little bit different. But again, for that shoe, that Hypervenom Phantom 3, that was my absolute favorite boot. I wore that through my entire senior season, entire way through Spain, and then further on in a little bit in Los Angeles. And then I actually just broke my last pair of Hypervenom 3s last season with Fremantle. I had a pair of the gray in the back with that kind of crimson orange in the soft ground variant. It was my last pair. I loved them more than any pair of boots, and I would say my favorite colorway from that generation was an all black pair, or I had an all red pair, which I really enjoyed. So those were the number 1 boots. I would give those also a 9.5 out of 10. I will warn you here, in any future boot review videos or any boot videos, I will be shocked if I ever have a 10 out of 10 perfect boot. Again, every boot has flaws. I think the Hypervenom 1, the only flaw that I think it would be the best boot of all time is if it didn't include lace loops like the ones on the Ultra 1. They were better than the ones on the Ultra 1.1, but they still were kind of loose, and if you got a cleat caught in them or a stud caught in them, they would often rip or they would get compromised as far as how they did in performance. So, but then again, the fit and feel of that boot was absolutely the best of all time in my opinion. So that is my number 1 boot of all time, guys. All right, guys, that is it for the video. Thanks so much for joining me for this top 5 boots. Comment down below what your top 5 boots are. Rank them in order. Start with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, in the order that you loved most in your career. It can be all brand new boots, old boots, anything in between. As you've seen, I've got a wide variety ranging back from like 2005, 2006 with the Laser all the way up to the brand new freaks that came out less than a month ago. So again, lots of fantastic boots. I've worn boots from all different companies: Nike, Puma, Adidas, Mizuno. I've worn Diadora, all the above, and those are my top 5. So without further ado, guys, that is it for the video. Thanks so much for joining me today. As always, be awesome. take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.